Long, long ago, in a land far, far away, people would tell each other stories, tales of myths and legends. So pull up by the fire and let me tell you a tale from Somewhen Else. The History of the Necronomicon by H.P. Lovecraft. The original title, Al-Azif, Azif being the word used by Arabs to designate the nocturnal sound made by insects, supposed to be the hulling of demons. Composed by Abdul Alhazred, a mad poet of Sana'a in Yemen, who is said to have flourished during the period of the Umayyad Caliphs, circa 700 AD. He visited the ruins of Babylon and the subterranean secrets of Memphis and spent 10 years alone in the great southern desert of Arabia, the Roa el-Khaliyah, or empty space of the ancients, and Dana, or crimson desert of the modern Arabs, which is held to be inhabited by protective evil spirits and monsters of death. Of this desert, many strange and unbelievable marvels are told by those who pretend to have penetrated it. In his last years, Al-Sarad dwelt in Damascus, where the Necronomicon, Al-Azif, was written, and of his final death or disappearance, 738 AD. Many terrible and conflicting things are told. He is said by Ibn Telegan, 12th century biographer, to have been seized by an invisible monster in broad daylight and devoured horribly before a large number of frozen witnesses. Of his madness, many things are told. He claimed to have seen fabulous Urim, or city of pillars, and to have found beneath the ruins of certain nameless desert town the shocking annals and secrets of a race older than mankind. He was only an indifferent Muslim, worshipping unknown entities whom he called Yog Sothoth and Cthulhu. In 950 AD, the Azef, or Necronomicon, which had gained a considerable, though surreptitious, circulation amongst the philosophers of the age, was secretly translated into Greek by Theodorus Vitellius of Constantinople, under the title Necronomicon. For a century, it impelled certain experiments to terrible attempts. When it was suppressed and burnt by the Patriarch Michael, after this, it is only heard of furtively, but around 1228, Olaus Wormius made a Latin translation later in the Middle Ages, and the Latin text was printed twice. Once in the 15th century in black letter, evidently by Germany, and once in the 17th, probably Spanish. Both editions being without identifying marks and located as to the time and place by each internal typographical evidence only. The last work, both Latin and Greek, was banned by Pope Gregory IX in 1232, shortly after its Latin translation, which called attention to it. The Arabic original was lost as early as Wormius's time, as indicated by his prefatory note, and no sight of the Greek copy, which was printed in Italy between 1500 and 1550, had been reported since the burning of a certain Salem man's library in 1692. An English translation made by Dr. Dee was never printed and exists only in fragments recovered from the original manuscript. Of the Latin text, now existing one, 15th century, is known to be in the British Museum under lock and key, while another, 17th century, is in the Bibliothèque Nationale at Paris. A 17th century edition is in the Widener Library at Harvard, and in the Library of Miskatonic University at Arkham, also in the Library of the University of Buenos Aires. Numerous other copies probably exist in secret, and a 15th century one is persistently rumored to form part of a collection of a celebrated American millionaire. A still vaguer rumor credits the preservation of a 16th century Greek text in the Salem family of Pickman, but it was so preserved it vanished with the artist R.U. Pickman, who disappeared early in 1926. The book is rigidly suppressed by the authorities of most countries and by all branches of organized religion. Reading leads to terrible consequences, it seems. It was from rumors of this book, of which relatively few of the general public know, that R.W. Chambers is said to have derived the idea of his early novel, The King in Yellow. The chronology of the Al-Azavas, or the Necronomicon, was written circa 730 AD at Damascus by Abdul Alhazred, the Mad Sultan. Then it was translated to Greek in 950 AD as the Necronomicon by Theodorus Philetas. It was burned by Patriarch Michael in 1050. Just the Greek text. The Arabic text now lost. Olos translates Greek to Latin around 1228. In 1232, the Latin edition and Greek were suppressed by Pope Gregory IX. 13th edition, a black letter edition is printed, probably Germany. In the 15th century, the Greek text printed in Italy, and in the 16th century, Spanish reprint of the Latin text. That is what we know. Nyarlathotep by H.P. Lovecraft. Nyarlathotep, the crawling chaos. I am the last. I will tell you the ardent void. I do not recall distinctly when it began, but it was months ago. The general tension was horrible. To a season of political and social upheaval was added a strange and brooding apprehension of hideous physical danger. A danger widespread and all-embracing. Such a danger as may be imagined only in the most terrible of phantasms of the night. I recall that the people went about with pale and worried faces, and whispered warnings and prophecies which no one dared consciously repeat or acknowledge to himself that he had heard. A sense of monstrous guilt was upon the land, and out of the abyss between the stars swept chill currents that made men shiver in the dark and lonely places. There was a demonic alteration in the sequence of the seasons. The autumn heat lingered fearsomely, and everyone felt that the world and perhaps the universe had passed from the control of known gods or forces to that of gods or forces which were unknown. And it was then that Nyarlathotep came out of Egypt. Who he was, none could tell, but he was of the old native blood and looked like a pharaoh. The Philistines knelt when they saw him, yet could not say why. He said he had risen up out of the blackness of 27 centuries, and that he had heard messages from places not on this planet. Into the lands of civilization came Nyarlathotep, swarthy, slender, and sinister, always buying strange instruments of glass and metal and combining them into instruments yet stranger. He spoke much of the sciences, of electricity and psychology, and gave exhibitions of power which sent his spectators away speechless, yet which swelled his fame to exceedingly magnitude. Men advised one another to see Nyarlathotep, and shuddered, and where Nyarlathotep went, rest vanished, for the small hours were rent with the screams of a nightmare. Never before had the screams of nightmare been such a public problem. Now the wise men almost wished they could forbid sleep in the small hours, that the shrieks of cities might less horribly disturb the pale, pitying moon, as it glimmered on green waters, gilding under bridges, and the old steepers crumbling against the sickly sky. I remember when Nyarlathotep came to my city, the great, the old, the terrible city of unnumbered crimes. My friend had told me of him, and of the impelling fascination and allurement of his revelations, and I burned with eagerness to explore his uttermost mysteries. My friend said they were horrible and impressive beyond my most fevered imaginations, and what was thrown on screen in the darkened realm prophesied things none but Nyarlathotep dared prophesy, and in that sputter of his sparks they were taken from men that which had never been taken before, yet which showed only in the eyes, and I heard it hinted abroad that those who knew Nyarlathotep looked on sights which others saw not. It was in the hot autumn that I went through the night with the restless crowds to see Nyarlathotep, through the stifling night and up the endless stairs into the choking room, and shadowed on a screen I saw hooded forms amidst ruins, and yellow, evil faces peering from behind the fallen monuments. And I saw the world battling against blackness, against the waves of destruction from ultimate space, whirling, churning, struggling around the dimming, cooling sun. Then the sparks played amazingly around the heads of the spectators, and hair stood up on end while shadows, more grotesque than I can tell, came out and squatted on the heads. And when I, who was colder and more scientific than the rest, mumbled a trembling protest about impulsor and static electricity, Nyarlathotep drove us all out, down the dizzy stairs into the damp, hot, deserted midnight streets. I screamed aloud that I was not afraid, that I never could be afraid, and others screamed with me for solace. We swore to one another that the city was exactly the same, and still alive, and when the electric lights began to fade, we cursed the company over and over, and laughed at the queer faces we made. I believe we felt something coming down from the greenish moon, for when we began to depend on its light, we drifted into curious involuntary marching formations, and seemed to know our destinations through. We dared not think of them. Once we looked at the pavement and found the blocks loose and displaced by grass, with scarce a line of rusted metal to show where the tramways had run. And again we saw a tram car, lone, windowless, dilapidated, and almost on its side. When we gazed around the horizon, we could not find the third tower by the river, and noticed that the silhouette of the second tower was ragged at the top. Then we split up into narrow columns, each of which seemed drawn in a different direction. One disappeared in a narrow alley to the left, leaving only the echo of a shocking moan. Another filed down a weed-choked subway entrance, howling with laughter that was mad. My own column was sucked toward the open country, and presently I felt a chill which was not of the hot autumn, for as we stalked out on the dark moor, we beheld around us the hellish moon glittered of evil snows, trackless, inexplicable snows, swept asunder in one direction only, where lay a gulf all the blacker for its glittering walls. The column seemed very thin indeed as it plodded dreamily into the gulf. I lingered behind, for the black rift in the green-litten snow was frightful, and I thought I had heard the reverberations of a disquieting wail as my companions vanished, but my power to linger was slight. As if beckoned by those who had gone before, I half floated between the titanic snowdrifts, quivering and afraid into the sightless vortex of the unimaginable. Screamingly sentient, dumbly delirious, only the gods that were can tell. A sickened, sensitive shadow, writhing in hands that are not hands, and whirled blindly past ghastly midnights of rotten creation, corpses of dead worlds, with sores that were cities, charnel winds that brush the pallid stars and make them flicker low. Beyond the world's vague ghosts of monstrous things, half-seen columns of unsanctified temples that rest on nameless rocks beneath space and reach up to dizzy vacuum above the spheres of light and darkness. And through this revolting graveyard of the universe, the muffled, maddening beating of drums, and thin, monotonous whine of blasphemous flutes from inconceivable, unlighted chambers beyond time, the detestable pounding and piping whereunto dance slowly, awkwardly, and absurdly the gigantic, tenebrous, ultimate gods, the blind, the faceless, mindless gargoyles whose soul is Nyarlathotep. Hey there! If you made it all the way to the end of this tale, you have many, many thanks from me. Thanks for listening to this story from another time. And if you have a moment, please feel free to like, comment, share, and subscribe. This helps me to know someone is out there listening. Otherwise, feel free to check out other stories and videos on the channel. And one final thank you for listening to this tale from Somewhen Else. Take care and keep safe.